please welcome to the stage INSA Executive Vice President John Doyen.
Good afternoon and welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a chance to enjoy your lunch and then spend some time with our exhibitors, recharge, and then also see one of the breakout panels. Our next plenary session brings us into a timely conversation with the Director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, Vice Admiral Frank Whitworth. As you know, NGA sits at the center of how our nation collects, analyzes, and applies geospatial intelligence, and the agency is driving critical initiatives in data, AI, and commercial integration. Admiral Whitworth will share how NGA is approaching today's rapidly changing threat environment while also preparing for the mission demands of tomorrow. Guiding that discussion is someone well known to this community, Francis Rose. Francis is an award-winning broadcaster, journalist, and the host of FedGov Today. Over his nearly 40-year career, he has interviewed virtually every major leader in the federal space and is one of the most trusted voices on the federal landscape. Please join me in welcoming Francis Rose and Admiral Whitworth to the stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Admiral, it's great to see you again.
I'm honored. Good to see you again.
Thank you for joining me today. Thank you all for coming, and thanks to AFCEA and INSA for the invitation to host this. It's great to be back in this room, too. I've been fortunate to talk to a lot of leaders in this room, and Admiral, I'm happy that you're now joining me on that list. I don't tend to do these in a particularly flowery way, as you know. I will say before we start that you have an opportunity to send questions in through the email. There should be little table tents on your tables for you to do that. Those are going to come to me on this tablet, and so I invite you to send those now. I do these a little bit differently. I don't dominate the conversation for a period of time and then ask your questions in the last 5 minutes or whatever. I'll incorporate them into the conversation that the Admiral and I are going to have through the course of the next 45 minutes or so. Oh, look, we're already done. It says 0. So we're finished. It's been great to see you, sir.
Fantastic.
The first thing I want to start with, obviously, is with the threat landscape looking like it looks. What are the opportunities and challenges for your agency as an important part of the IC today?
It's a great way to kick it off. Thank you, Francis. So when we talk about opportunities for GeoInt, geospatial intelligence, I think we're in a golden age, frankly, for GeoInt. And I would like to baseline what I'm talking about, especially for NGA. Before I do that, we're talking about targeting, warning, and the safety of navigation. Warning is kind of the behemoth. That's the one where you establish a baseline of equipment and behaviors across the world based on the visual dimension, and you sound off when something is not quite right. Something might be worrisome. Targeting is to help us think through effects and places on the Earth where there might be vulnerabilities or centers of gravity, and then safety of navigation, probably the least heralded thing that we do in GeoInt and especially at NGA, where we're keeping people alive by taking responsibility as a combat support agency for the sanctity of the data they use for their maps and charts, and also for where they are on the Earth, that precision of navigation. So we could go into a lot more detail there, but to get back to your question now, having established that as sort of what we do in GeoInt. This is a golden age for GeoInt, and it's really because of the convergence of three things. Number one is the availability and a growing availability of sensors, and especially space-based sensors. And they're very good, and they're going to bring a lot of data, and we'll talk about that in just a second when we talk about challenges. Another is the availability of advanced technologies, especially AI and ML, to help us with sifting through all that and processing all that and disseminating all that. And then the third would be the availability of a really energized commercial sector. And we'll probably talk about commercial imaging and the availability that it brings and how excited we are in this regard. So between those three, that's a really great opportunity, a convergence. Mm-hmm. Now for the challenges. While I won't detail exactly what the % increase in terabytes from space will be, it is substantial over the next decade. And we're all about, right now, efficiencies, and we've done a great job to ensure that this is the most efficient agency it possibly can be. And so we need to ensure that we can absolutely match the data to understanding. We don't want all of that data, all of those images, all those files, and they're very dense files, by the way. We don't want them falling on a cutting room floor. The nation has been through this particular conundrum in the past. At the very beginning of Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom, we made available a lot of full motion video. And we realized, oh, we need to have people actually make sense of this and render understanding. So I'm very confident in our way ahead. This is why I'm excited about the availability of AI. There's another form of supply, though, that I will offer we need to reason through, and I also am confident in this regard, and that will be compute. So to ensure that you can apply AI and ML to help you sift through that deluge of data, you're going to have a good amount of compute, and you're going to have a good amount of storage. We're very proud of our compression results. I would tell you that we're kind of an industry standard right now when it comes to the compression of massive files of imagery. But let's understand that the eureka moments happen typically by going back in time. You get some new indicator and you go back in time into what you have in storage of all that data, and you put the pieces of the puzzle together. One other supply piece is on the human dimension, and specifically STEM qualified people. And while we're not exclusively STEM, we do have a very large network. We have a very high preponderance of needs when it comes to understanding the world, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit later in our discussion. And we need to make sure that we keep this population of great people and professionals, very patriotic people, equipped with their STEM readiness as well. And that kind of gets into where are we actually getting new talent from all these great schools we have throughout the United States.
We will talk about all of those things if time permits, and I'm sure if I don't get to them, they will have questions about all of those issues as well. All right, 3 points for the golden age. The compute piece of the advanced technology one struck me because I think the mind goes immediately to quantum, and yet someone here told me today, we've been 5 years away from quantum for 25 years. And so how does that continual grasping and so on, and the Moore's law continuing at the pace that it's continued for the last however many years instead of some exponential growth like quantum, how does that inform the way that your colleagues think about parsing all of that data, especially to the point that you made about connecting pieces that are not necessarily from today, that are archived somewhere?
I think the root of your question goes to the relationship we have with the commercial sector, because we're not necessarily going to figure this out alone. We have right now, and I'm not going to talk about compute yet, I'm going to talk about storage. Right now, we're over half of the IC's cloud. And we rely on a really good partner in this regard to ensure that it's archivable, indexable, and findable at that time that you need it. Now, compute gets into, that particular prime is, and this is not a classified fact, it's AWS. They're going to be very interested, obviously, in what we provide in the way of compute, but so too will others. And from a resiliency perspective, we're going to listen to everybody. We've got the likes of the CDAO within the Pentagon. We've got people who are dedicated to this within the DNI, ODNI, and then we've got the commercial sector. And so we're going to be able to draw a lot of different expertise, not to mention our own. We are unique in the size of these files, and just to make sure everybody is kind of baselined on this. When we're looking for something that is typically hidden from us, and we're talking about a piece of equipment, or we're talking about, a behavior that is probably something that a country or an actor wants to keep away from the United States, we're looking at something that is 2/100,000% of the field of view of the sensor. That's a big difference compared to the 80% of a sensor that you might marvel at and think it's wonderful when you go through global entry or you go through TSA and it matches up with the baseline it has for your identity. That is great, that is wonderful, but that's 80% of the field of view. That gives you an idea of the size of these files and frankly, the micro nature of what it is we're looking for and we need to find even after the fact. So I'm confident in the relationships we have with our interagency teammates as well as our commercial teammates in figuring out exactly your question.
What are the most important things that you would like your commercial teammates to help you with now, to do for you now, and what do you think that you can do and your colleagues at NGA can do to facilitate that relationship, strengthen it, and make it work better for both sides?
Yeah, so let's start with imaging. I have a saying that I actually stole from one of my mentors, I just want it all. Okay, in this business of intelligence, and not just GEOINT, we tend to be insatiable. We feel we feel as though we're not completely done with our day or with our month or a year if we haven't tapped into more and more information. And in a way, that may seem like a fool's errand because you're creating a problem for yourself, but no, in this business, we want it all. And so we're very excited at NGA and in the GEOINT enterprise to ensure that there is a max availability of commercial imaging for everyone. Now that involves knowing, as a combat support agency, that involves knowing what your denominator is. There are effectively 4 parts to the denominator, and this is where we do bring expertise to the discussion to answer your question. We understand national technical means. I think everyone understands what the NRO provides in national technical means. That is best of breed. It is absolutely exquisite, and the nation always needs that. We understand this commercial dimension, and we understand what they're able to provide. We understand also what a new proliferated architecture, which is effectively a team a team investment between Title 10 and Title 50, championed by the U.S. Space Force. That is very exciting because that will be growing by leaps and bounds over the next decade. And then there's a part that we rarely talk about, which are some of the offerings from some of our international partners. You have to have a view of all of that to ensure that if it's a left-hand, right-hand situation, in the left hand, if I know all of that which is available at that point in time that a requirement is made known to us, then we know at that point, I don't have that. I've looked at the entire denominator for this particular requirement. I need to go ahead and buy that. If you don't have a view of the entire denominator, then you're not necessarily going to be the best steward of taxpayers' money if you're actually buying twice. And this is another guiding principle for us, and I do think it's something that we will work very much with the interagency, with the people that I report to, as well as the commercial sector to ensure that stewardship is preserved through all of that.
When I first started talking to folks and following the issues and the mission of your agency 10, 15 years ago, there was a great discussion. Some of it was philosophical and some of it was tactical about what the role of the agency was going to be and what the role of the commercial sector was going to be as far as supplying information and so on. And that was about the time that this transition that you've described was starting to happen, that the commercial sector really was creating some of this information that was valuable and maybe more practical for NGA to acquire than to collect itself. But there was a cultural issue, as is often the case in the Pentagon and in the IC about whether that was the right thing. Is it your sense that that cultural issue has kind of been overcome by events or has been remedied or whatever, that the community as a whole, not even just NGA, but the GEOINT community and government as a whole understands this is how it's going to be moving forward and this is a good thing for them moving forward?
I'm going to take a stab at what that cultural impasse may have been. I wasn't here for that discussion. I have a feeling it had a lot to do with secrets, and it had a lot to do with classification and some of the walls between the availability of unclassified information and unclassified. And I would tell you, based on our experience, especially in the last 3 years relative to the conflict in Russia and Ukraine, and the availability of something we call GEGD, a portal that we actually worked on with the commercial sector, to make 400,000 vetted users get, at the time it is immediately available, commercial images, to include the Ukrainians. I think that whatever that impasse was, we probably, yes, the short answer is I think we've moved along.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Ukraine, and I was curious what lessons one is learning in your community from what's going on in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and so on, not related to the tactical issues on the ground, but related to the way that each side fighting against the other side is collecting information, is potentially using GeoInt that you can then leverage at some future point if, sadly, it would become necessary.
I think that the conflict has demonstrated the real need for unclassified imaging when it comes to articulating the truth and articulating what we like to call just the balls and strikes of the situation. We have a mandate, I believe, to ensure that if there is an image out there, and I'm not saying necessarily it's a commercial image or something like that, it may be over social media or something like that, that could foment some kind of violence, or it might foment harsh emotion or reactions. We want to jump on that and compare it to that which we know. And so commercial imagers are a source, NTM is a source, of course, and we do some comparison to ensure that we kind of establish the validity of that. If you look at it from a geostrategic perspective, I think early in this conflict, it was very clear that we needed to be able to articulate in unclassified ways exactly what's happening on the ground. And so while we have enabled, per our orders, we have enabled the defense of Ukraine. In the meantime, we also have done, I think, a nice job, and I think, and the commercial collection has been instrumental in this, commercial imagery especially, in articulating everything, and from a very objective perspective. And so that to me is very relevant to your question.
The first question from the audience actually ties into that. The question is, what's NGA's strategy for maintaining GeoInt supremacy in the face of increasingly sophisticated denial and deception techniques employed by adversaries? And I would argue that the key word there is deception techniques, that your peers and colleagues that I talk to in uniform talk to me about contested environments, of course, but they think, at least they tell me they think as much about deceptive information at the tip of the spear as a denial of information at the tip of the spear?
It's a great question. It's one that I've addressed in the 5 resolutions that I offered for our year of NGAI, as I call it. 2025 we declared as the year of NGAI, and one of them was to ensure that we know enough about ourselves and our vulnerabilities, and we know enough about our adversaries and their clever nature, that we have people dedicated to answering this question. The tradecraft I'm not going to go into, but I will absolutely tell you that it made the list when you're talking about the top 5 resolutions for how we're going to use AI and ML from now into the future, and we need to ensure that this is one of them.
How are you judging, well, give me a thumbnail if you would on each of the 5, and how you're determining then the progress that you're making against the marks that you set at the beginning of the year?
Well, let's start at the very basic level, and it was the very first one that I uttered in January, and that was, are we task organized as an agency for AI? And we had done a nice job of this. We had people who had the word AI in their mission, had AI in their title, but do we have enough of them, and do we have something that was organized and that made sense? And so we did attack this right off the bat, and we established the Director for AI Mission, the Director for AI Standards, and the Director for AI Programs. Director for AI Mission, a new billet, one that did not exist, how to integrate into training the combatant commands and the services, how to ensure that their systems are set up with the likes of NGA Maven, Maven Smart System, and that they are actually getting the feeds that they need. How are we doing from a multi-level security perspective, the here and now of employment of AI in the targeting cycle. Director of AI programs, how are we going to do this from a stewardship perspective, not only with the taxpayers' money and do it responsibly, but also from the perspective of all those users. And here's what I mean. We don't want to fixate only on the targeting cycle with NGA Maven. We want to ensure that it brings goodness to the rest of what we do, like warning, like safety of navigation. So we establish the PEOs, and we establish one PEO that is the PEO for advanced analytics. Notice it doesn't say for warning or targeting or safety of navigation. It's advanced analytics. And that is starting to bear some fruit. And so the director of AI programs, I think, was well-founded. It happens to be our chief acquisition executive, so he knows what to do to make sure we do it correctly. And then there's director of AI standards. And now we're talking about a person who will ensure that all of the development that is going on out there is not so unbridled that it veers away from the standards that we as Americans hold true, that which we have in the rules of engagement from the Commander-in-Chief and the Secretary of Defense that have been delegated to the engagement authority of that combatant command. We just need to make sure that there are no hobby shops going on here. We want to ensure that at its core, we establish a continuum for accreditation of GEOINT models. And we're well on our way there with something called A-GAME, the accreditation of GEOINT AI models, and it's a continuum based on risk and evaluation.
I love the term hobby shops. How do you track that? How does your team track that to make sure that the guardrails, the kind of the boundaries that you've set up, that you've established through that, stick and will stick over time and not result in some kind of creep?
Well, I think your question goes to the brilliance of functional management. And so while it is statutorily only a coordination responsibility, that's still pretty important. That means that somebody has to raise his or her right hand and say, I will take responsibility for GEOINT, for the community, and ensure that we do have standards that are responsible. And while I use the term hobby shop as it's a colloquial piece, we would just want to make sure that we don't have something get into a COCOM or into a service or into the interagency that is either irresponsible, not fully tested, uses training data that hasn't been evaluated, processes that haven't been evaluated, or moves away from the principles, especially the principles like the laws of armed conflict that we hold very dear.
It sounds like the intelligence equivalent of the shadow IT term that's been popular, where somebody goes and buys a server, sticks it under their desk, plugs it into the agency system, not NGAs, of course, and the CIO doesn't know it's there and doesn't know what it's exactly being used for or why it exists.
These are big responsibilities. And one thing I want to make clear, we do not want to move in the direction of like the ATO process where everyone sits and waits.
Yeah.
We want to enable this process to be self-governing so that COCOMs and services, we train the trainers, we train the accreditors, and then they too can accredit the right way. That's why the word standards is so important to the title, the Director of AI Standards.
You've made a couple of references to the workforce already in our conversation, and the times that you and I have spoken before, you are always quick to cite the team, the entire team at the agency, as your greatest asset. One of the questions, the next question is about the workforce. And this in particular, I think I'd like to take us to a broader discussion of your team. How will analyst training and tradecraft need to evolve in order to make maximal and responsible use of new AI technologies? And I would be curious not just about AI, but you mentioned machine learning and you talked about those other three aspects of the golden age of GEOINT. All of those are driven by people and the quality of the people that you have to do the work, I imagine.
This is a great question. I think it goes to the heart of why do we have such a great workforce at NGA, and I would tell you it goes to this intense curiosity and pride that they maintain for being responsible stewards of the GEOINT domain. There is nowhere to turn, no blame that can be offered anywhere else when it comes to GeoInt at the agency level. And they do take the responsibility of being a standard bearer very, very seriously, as do I as the functional manager. So they have these inquiring and discerning hearts that drive them towards accepting improvements to include AI and ML. Sometimes we're drawn to the narrative whereby people are going to be fearful of AI and ML, that it might replace them. I've got a workforce that is excited that they may actually move towards 100% completion of what they were supposed to do that particular day, as opposed to 60 or 80%. And right now, I would just tell you that there's the development of just one program that helps them do their job that does involve AI and ML, addressing one of the most wicked problems that we had, which was the convergence of data labeling with structured observations, and also bringing in LLMs to ensure they get a little help on the writing piece in a way that's contextual and makes sense. And for, I'm not going to go into how much it costs. I'm just going to say it wasn't that much. And we basically, through a really strong collaboration with the commercial sector, in about 4 days coded something that I thought was going to be a wicked problem that was going to take the better part of a year. And you can just tell by the amount of morale increase, as we're unfurling this for our workforce right now, that this is very meaningful to them. They don't like going home with a little bit left, maybe 20 to 40% left that they didn't get to, and they like the advantage this portends, provided they one day are going to have the compute and the storage that they need as the data deluge continues.
It sounds like your experience with those kinds of tools is the same as I hear about at other agencies, where it starts small and then folks find out what their colleagues and friends are able to do in another part of the organization, and they say, I want some of that.
Yeah, and for us, we won't be insular in making it available only to NGA. We take this leadership of GeoInt Enterprise very seriously. We have this thing called the National System for GeoInt, NSG. So everyone who has investment in GeoInt will, at some point, benefit from this particular application. We're still literally unfurling it right now and making sure that we have a good training regimen, but I'm very excited for the entire enterprise, frankly.
Last time you and I spoke, you used a term that I thought was particularly apropos. You used the term workforce fluency. And I wonder what the current state, in your view, of your workforce fluency is. Maybe a little definition of that would be helpful too, because unfortunately these folks were not in on that conversation. And where you think your strengths are and where you would like to shore up.
Well, if the fluency is with AI and ML, I think it's improving by leaps and bounds, and especially as we enter the use of agentic models and multimodal. And so I'll offer this. We as one of the things that we've done with the Director of AI Mission is establish boot camps, in AI, ML, and its application to GeoInt. And that's very exciting for people because they typically will come down and they will get even more fluent on these applications and what it means for them. What we're finding is about 2 hours into the 8-hour day, they're just saying, faster, I need to go faster, I have this I need to accomplish. Because on multimodal, it brings so much room and capacity for innovation and imagination. As opposed to let's get into the detection business and render, we're up to almost 2 million detections a day. So that's a tremendous metric and it's great. They're interested in what does that allow me to do? What does that allow me to deduce? Now I'm able to actually ask some questions. We're going to use a little agentic here. We're going to use a little LLM here. And we're going to have something like, for instance, we use this program called Nomad, which allows the best of breed kind of approach for multiple models to take kind of the decision making off of them as to, do I go to this type of model or this type of model? So the answer is fluency is improving because they're so incredibly imaginative.
What are the tools that you're providing them to learn that fluency? What's the infrastructure that's required for those folks to continue to grow in the capacity that you just
For
described?
AI and ML?
For any of it.
Okay, now if we're talking about GeoInt writ large in the enterprise, I've got to compliment our college right off the bat from a training perspective. I've been in many different organizations, sometimes where the training element feels as though they don't get the resources they need, they don't get the credit they deserve. The workforce may actually feel that they're somewhat separated. It's not that way at NGA. And every single time I ride an elevator with somebody who is on their way to a course, I will always ask, and how is it? And I don't think that, I honestly think our people are honest enough they would tell me if it wasn't that good. Every single time they're like, it is extremely good. And we get really good compliments. So that is one form of fluency writ large. And we have people who travel. You know, we also have mobile training teams that go out to the commands and go to the services and render that level of fluency. And that will be the secret to our success in the future as we take AI/ML to the next level and ensure that it's well integrated into the college as well.
There are two more themes that I want to hit in the short time that we have left. One of them, we have a question from the audience about innovation. How is NGA fostering innovation through public-private partnerships, especially with emerging tech companies in geospatial AI and data analytics? You and I have spoken before about building an innovation infrastructure inside the agency.
Yeah, what's nice and what I'm seeing, our ADC, our Assistant Director for Capabilities, who is also our acquisition executive, Trey Treadwell, what I'm noticing from him and our PEOs, and which is now more of an, I think most people are very comfortable with the word PEOs as an approach in capabilities. We're not just going insular and asking our own team, hey, what do you got for innovation? We're actually doing pitch days to industry. We're having industry days. We've got another one coming up in November, and they're typically like standing room only. And we got a pretty good size auditorium, and we'll fill that thing when we allow industry to come in and either listen to us or then continue the conversation with us, give us some ideas.
Are you doing those kinds of things just here, or are you doing them in St. Louis also?
Both, yes. And so we have had industry engagement out there as well. I think this is, it's a good segue to St. Louis. St. Louis is very, when we're talking about a building, it might just be a building, but it's more than that. It represents an entire ecosystem that really is founded in history. When you think about the history of aviation and the Army Air Corps and the maps and Defense Mapping Agency and the Aeronautical Map Agency, et cetera, it makes sense that we are still very grounded in the city of St. Louis. Now with the new building that we are going to open up a week from tomorrow, we're going to have a flag raising tomorrow just for our workforce. But a week from tomorrow, now that major construction is over, and on time, by the way, on budget, we're going to celebrate a little bit with some really important leaders who have helped us get here. From the time it was a decision almost 10 years ago to now, here we are. We're actually in North St. Louis, almost 100 acres, part of an ecosystem that involves academia and industry and government and sponsorship throughout, advocacy throughout. And here we are. And we're going to have actually, a portion of that building that will open itself up to education. We are in North St. Louis. We are in a neighborhood. We are now neighbors, and we feel some responsibility to ensure that people can learn about that building and about our mission and our people, and then maybe they might want to contribute.
The other theme I wanted to hit is the common word among just about all discussions revolving around anything about the Pentagon over the last several months has been lethality. And, okay, if you have a picture of where the bad guy is and I'm going to be able to go get him, I get that part. But it's much more complicated than that. The value that Intel and the GeoInt in particular brings to the lethality discussion, I'm sure.
That's right. That word underscores our mission, especially from an effects perspective and a warning perspective, but especially from a targeting perspective. And so anyone who would sit through our 8:45 Ops and Intel update will hear that mission of improving our lethality and improving our effectiveness on behalf of those trigger pullers, those warriors who might be in harm's way, and to do exactly what the Commander-in-Chief and the Secretary have mandated. It is absolutely front and center as to why we're having that meeting. And I say that a lot. It's like, this is why we have these meetings. As we think through how to not only review what has been the traffic over the past and our products over the past 12 to 14 hours, but more importantly, what do those warfighters need? What does the Secretary need, the DNI, the President? What do they need now based on these findings? Every single time that we have an ONI, we're thinking about the future just as much as we are reviewing the past.
And now you have an advantage, I imagine, over others because you've been the person who those people have asked in those meetings and other assignments of yours in the past. How does that inform the way that you respond to your people when you're directing them to be ready to do those things?
It's a gentle Socratic method. I ask questions that I just happen to know based on experience. Should be questions that they're going to get from that combatant commander, from the chairman, from the secretary, potentially even from the president. I think over the course of 36 years have gotten a little bit of a knack of anticipation, and I try to help them through that. But a lot of times they're educating me. We get briefings, I can't tell you how many times where I say, I did not know that, and I am much better now for this briefing. Thanks a lot, I learned a ton. So it's a give and take.
What's the main, this is maybe philosophical more than tactical, what's the main difference in your view in the way that the agency does business now versus the day that you took over?
I would say there has been a cultural shift, and we touched on it a little bit, and I'm very proud of this, where mission is driving and driving and driving to the point of very, very timely delivery. We had a watch, it was fine, we had a good watch. The people, kept accountability for all of our souls, and that's something that, I take very, very seriously. But I really did want the watch to have more of an input into the review and dissemination the next morning. And that means that somebody needs to be awake in the middle of the night who is empowered by myself and the deputy director and the chief of staff and all of the key components, while we all, take a few hours to sleep, to look at what the new collection has brought and make a decision that this needs to get out by 04 so that the rest of the community and all of those trigger pullers, as they're waking up in some places, so that they're aware. And so we have really worked on timeliness. I think this is why our traction, I like to review, kind of like how we doing, what's being read, what's being carried in either national or some of the more local combatant commands. How's our traction? It's up about 800% over the last 3 years. And I think that, that is not only a structural change in the way that we organized our watch, it is a personnel change with putting a senior executive awake in the middle of the night, and just a philosophical kind of cultural, frankly, it became almost a narcotic effect for everyone to just want to get at this even more and more. With the 845, as I say, a gentle Socratic method where we get to show the analysts that we believe in them and that we're interested and that we're reading their stuff and that we're also listening to them. So I hope that has been kind of the culmination of a lot of effort that everybody can be proud of.
Admiral, congratulations on St. Louis. I know how valuable that has been that process has been to the agency and how it will be moving forward. Thank you very much for your time today. My apologies to all of you whose questions I did not get a chance to ask. I'm grateful for your attention. Thanks again to AFCEA and INSA for inviting me to be a part of this, and I hope you have a great rest of the conference. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Francis. Thank you. Thank you.